My name is Daniel. I'm 43 years old, divorced, no kids. I own a modest construction business and live alone in a rented house just outside of White Pine, Michigan. Not the kind of place that ends up on any map unless you're specifically looking to disappear. I'm not a superstitious man. My life has been measured in drywall, invoices, hours behind the wheel of a truck. I believe in schedules and structure, in logic, in the known. Or at least I used to. Before the lake. Before the door. It began last August, just before the leaves started to dry out and lose their shine. I had taken on a small lakeside cabin renovation for a retired professor, a sweet old guy named Wallace who had inherited the property from his brother. It was remote, tucked deep in the woods, and hadn't been touched in over 30 years. The professor only visited once or twice a year, but now he wanted it fixed up, while he still had the knees to enjoy it. The cabin sat on the edge of Red Eagle Lake, a small, still body of water that barely warranted a name. The shoreline was thick with pine and birch, and the water had a strange, mirror-like quality to it. Always dark, even at noon. No boats, no docks, not even fishers. Just a lake and silence. The first few days were uneventful. I cleared debris, patched up the roof, cleaned out the porch. But every evening, I noticed something strange. No birds, no bugs. Even the wind seemed to avoid the lake. On the third evening, after a long day of installing new windows, I sat on the porch, drank a warm beer, and stared out across the water. The surface was glass smooth, but I could have sworn I saw something ripple beneath it. Not a fish, not something natural. It was too straight, as if something long and flat had moved just under the surface, like a pane of glass shifting. It unsettled me, but I blamed it on exhaustion. I went to bed early. That night I dreamed of drowning. Not flailing, gasping, panicked drowning, but slow, weighted descent. Like something was pulling me under with gentle, inevitable strength. I could see the surface above me, pale and unreachable, and below, the dark outlines of shapes, massive, motionless. I woke up coughing. My lungs felt heavy, as if I'd actually inhaled water. By the end of the week, I'd started noticing things inside the cabin. At first, it was just damp footprints, small, barefoot, leading from the front door to the old fireplace. I laughed it off, probably just tracking mud and not realizing it. But they kept appearing, always in the same pattern. Door to hearth. And they were never there in the morning, only in the evening, just before sunset. On the 8th day, I decided to explore the lake. Not swim, I'm not an idiot, but to walk the perimeter. Maybe there was an animal that kept making the prints, something with oddly human feet. I took a flashlight and made my way around the shore. It was quiet. Too quiet. About halfway around the southern edge, I found it. A stone ring, maybe 5 feet wide, half submerged in the water about 10 feet from shore. It looked like the frame of a well or an old hatch, made of gray slate stones, covered in moss and mud. I hadn't seen it before, and it wasn't visible from the cabin. As I stared, the surface of the water above it shimmered, like heat distortion. Then, very faintly, I saw the outline of a handle, a circular one. Iron, rusted. It looked like a door. I didn't go in. I didn't even get closer. My instincts screamed not to. Instead, I walked back to the cabin, locked every door, and tried not to think. That night, the dream came again. But this time, I wasn't sinking alone. There was someone, or something, descending beside me. Not swimming, not moving, just falling in perfect sync. I couldn't see their face, only their long, pale hands reaching toward mine. I woke up with a nosebleed. My pillow was soaked in blood. I left the cabin that morning, told Wallace I'd come back after a break. I lied. I had no intention of going back, not ever. But something started happening after I returned home. I began hearing water in places there shouldn't be water. The sound of dripping behind walls. Wet footprints on my hardwood floor. My bathtub filling itself slowly at night, the knob unmoved. And the dreams. They didn't stop. They got clearer. I began seeing the door, not just underwater but in strange places, reflections in mirrors, patterns in tree bark. Once, in the condensation on my window. Always round, always slightly ajar. Something was opening it, slowly. And I was starting to remember something. Something I'd forgotten since childhood. A summer, long ago. A trip with my father to a lake that felt eerily similar. And a game I played with a friend no one else could see. A friend who taught me a rhyme I hadn't thought about in 30 years. 1 knock for waking, 2 knocks for night, 3 knocks for silence, 4 to lose sight. I thought it was nonsense. Now I'm not so sure. This morning I found a package on my doorstep, no return address. Inside was a photo, an aerial shot of Red Eagle Lake, but the lake was different. In the center was a perfect black circle, smooth, featureless, like a hole in the photo itself, and taped to the back in familiar shaky handwriting. You left it open. I didn't sleep the night after the package arrived. I couldn't. I sat in my kitchen with the photo on the table, lit by a dim lamp. That black circle in the lake, smooth and too perfect, looked less like a physical object and more like a gap. A hole in reality, like someone had erased a piece of the world and printed over it. The handwriting on the back of the photo. You left it open. That was the worst part. I recognized it. It was mine, my own hand, my own strange, nervous cursive, only older, messier. I hadn't written it, not recently. But it was mine. Like a letter sent from a version of myself I hadn't yet become. That night, the sound of dripping water returned, but not from the walls. It was in the bedroom. Slow, regular, like a faucet barely open. I followed the sound in the dark, flashlight in hand, heart beating in my neck. There was a puddle on the carpet, a perfect circle, no leaks above, no glass tipped over. Just that damp outline. And in the center, the faintest impression of something round, like a doorknob had been pressed into the floor. I don't remember deciding to go back, not consciously. But the next morning I was packing the truck. I told myself it was to close it, though I had no idea what that meant. No plan, no tools, just this pull, heavy like gravity, dragging me back toward that lake. Toward that thing I had disturbed. The drive felt like a blur. The roads seemed unfamiliar, even though I'd driven them weeks before. The trees were different, older, their trunks twisted as if they'd turned to look after I passed. I reached the cabin just before dusk. It looked untouched, no signs of intrusion, but the air around it was heavier now, like walking into a room that had been sealed for years. The kind of air that clings to your lungs and hums inside your ears. I stepped onto the porch. The door was open, only a crack, but unmistakably ajar. That was new. Inside, everything was exactly as I left it. Tools still on the table, coffee mug in the sink. But the floor was wet, not soaked, just damp enough to reflect the dying sunlight in long, crooked shapes. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the living room and waited for something I couldn't name. The house creaked in ways it never had before. The wind outside didn't blow. It whispered. Around midnight, the fireplace lit itself. No wood, no flame, just light. A dull, reddish glow, like coals that had been burning all along, waiting for me to notice. And then I heard it. A knock. Not at the door. Below me. 1 knock, then 2, then silence. No third, no fourth. I stood, legs stiff, every inch of my body buzzing with cold. The knocking came again. Faint, distant, from beneath the floorboards. It was calling. I knew where it wanted me to go. I took the flashlight, stepped outside, and made my way down the path toward the southern edge of the lake. The woods had changed. The trees leaned inward, their branches clawing at each other. There were no stars, no moon. Only the dim, sourceless light of my flashlight and the smell, thick, metallic, like wet stone and old pennies. When I reached the shore, the ring was there. More visible now, like the water had receded. The stones gleamed with moisture, black moss clinging to their cracks. And in the center, the door. It wasn't underwater anymore. It sat flat, flush with the earth, round and iron. An enormous hatch, the kind you might find in a submarine or old bunker. The handle was rusted, but whole. It pulsed slightly, as if something underneath it was breathing. I approached. The air grew colder with each step. The trees behind me were gone, or perhaps just further than they should have been. The world had shrunk down to this spot. Me, the door, and whatever waited beneath it. I knelt and placed my hand on the iron. It was warm, too warm. Against all reason, I turned the handle. It gave with a groan like an animal in pain, and the hatch lifted, revealing a smooth tunnel descending into blackness. No ladder, no steps, just a sloping passage that curved away into the earth. A wet wind blew upward from the tunnel. Not strong, but insistent. And with it, the sound of water dripping and whispering. I stepped inside. At first, the tunnel was stone, damp, cold, and tight. But as I descended, the walls grew smoother, less natural. The air changed, growing thick and humid. I couldn't see the light behind me anymore. Only the forward path, lit by something. A reddish glow that seemed to have no source. Then the floor changed. No longer stone, but wood. Old wood, wet. I walked carefully, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the hollow tunnel. And then I saw the door, another one, this time upright, tall, wooden, simple. A single peephole at eye level, carved into the frame in that same strange rhyme from my childhood. 1 knock for waking, 2 knocks for night, 3 knocks for silence, 4 to lose sight. I reached for the knob, but the door opened on its own. Behind it was a room, impossible in scale. I had stepped into something vast, something that couldn't fit beneath a lake. The ceiling arched high above, too high to see. The walls were layered with doors, dozens, hundreds, all identical. And the sound, oh God, the sound. Whispers from every direction. Whispers layered over whispers, like every voice in the world speaking at once but saying nothing. The air shimmered with motion, though I saw no one. And then, at the far end of the space, a figure, not a person, a shape, humanoid, but tall, wrong, limbs too long, skin like wet paper. Its face had no features, only a stretched, smooth surface, pulsing with breath. It pointed to one of the doors, and I understood. Each door was a version of me, a choice I hadn't made, a path I didn't walk. Some showed me dead, others, worse. I saw myself alone in a cell. I saw myself screaming in fire. I saw myself as a child, still drowning. And then, I saw myself here, standing in this room, watching, choosing. I turned back, ran. The tunnel stretched longer than before. The walls pulsed, the floor tilted. I didn't stop until I reached the surface, gasping, knees in mud. The door closed behind me with a click. It was gone. No hatch, no stones, just water. Still, dark, empty. I stumbled back to the cabin, collapsed, slept for the first time in what felt like days. When I woke, the cabin was different, newer, modern windows, fresh paint, no tools, no coffee mug. My phone, gone. My truck, gone. And on the porch, a suitcase, my clothes, and inside the suitcase, the photo, the one of the lake. Only this time, the black circle in the water was gone. Instead, the entire lake was missing. In its place, forest, unbroken, endless trees. I walked to where the lake had been. Nothing. No water, no shoreline, just ground, as if a body of water had never existed there at all. I live in that cabin now. It's my name on the deed. Neighbors wave when I pass, though I don't recognize them. My phone has photos I don't remember taking. Me, smiling. Me, building the deck. But I know what I saw. I remember the doors. I remember the figure. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still and the moon is hidden, I hear a knock beneath the floorboards. One knock, then two, then three. And I hold my breath waiting for the fourth. Because I know if I hear it, I won't be here anymore. Not in this version, not in this life. Just somewhere else, behind the door.